I was brainstorming with my cousin, Nils, which Rayman run we should be doing today. I mean, we've already done so many. High score runs, low score runs, many speed runs. Runs where you have to finish in X amount of time and whoever gets the highest or lowest score wins. We even made it to the Desert of the Canaran once, while trying a run where the person playing can't see the screen and the other one has to describe everything via Discord webcam. Whatever we do, it's always a battle, but the hilarious part is that most of the time, after a battle, we are just so tired and cooked. You focus for so long that you are just done. Anyway, we were brainstorming and fully anticipating that we should start another speedrun. I asked, are there any Rayman runs that we haven't done? So it was quiet for a while and then my cousin started laughing and he said, we could do a run while only strafing. And I was immediately sold on the idea. I mean, should be fun, yes? How hard can this be? Boy, were we wrong. This felt like torturing. And we don't even know if it's gonna be possible. So here is our attempt of beating Rayman 3 while permanently holding R2 to strafe. So first things to notice, you've probably already seen it, but Rayman will constantly be focused on one point. Meaning the camera and the way Rayman is facing are going to be incredibly difficult to keep under control. And because we are very slow, are we able to break Globox out of the plum juice barrel in time? Well, my cousin Nils wasn't.
Oh, wacht, ga ik Globox wel op tijd halen?
Ja, weet ik niet.
Ik denk het wel, ja. Nee, hij loopt weg! Kut! Nee, ik heb hem 2 keer gehit en toen rende.
Oh, het is mij wel gelukt, yes. Luckily, I was in time and we can move on. Now I have taken a small lead in the race because yes, we are racing against each other to see if we can beat it and if we can, whoever beats it first. This button took a few punches to press, but the hits did eventually register. There is a better strategy, but I will figure this out in the next room. See, when I entered this room, I see that Rayman is positioned the wrong way. That is a problem because how are we going to break the piggy banks then? Well, Rayman can still grab ledges while strafing, meaning that when I want to face Rayman another way, I have to find a ledge to grab that makes Rayman face that way. And here in this room are so many platforms that I almost always can pick which side I want to look at. Sure, it takes some time, but that doesn't matter. I will eventually break them all and make it to the next room, where I discovered that I have made a mistake. Rayman is facing the entirely wrong way. And there are no platforms here to use the ledge grab strategy. But always think out of the box. Of course we are going to use a platform, but in the last room, and come back. Now we are faced the right way. The rest of the Fairy Council is basically some weird form of platforming. In the room where you have to find Andre in a hole in the wall, you can have Rayman positioned the wrong way, so that he doesn't grab the climbing wall. But that's going to be a problem for later in the run. Right now we are doing very good. This part is really annoying though. Took me several minutes. What's so frustrating about this is that there is a hanging climbing wall. Now that's a problem on its own because Rayman cannot move other than straight ahead while on these walls. Even in itself is that a problem, but here it's really hard because 2 pieces fall out of the vines. Most attempts you just jump on and cannot proceed to even the first one. That means to go all the way back here, via here, yada yada, jump on this, jump on here, ledge grab, and voila. And we failed again. However, you can do it though, just keep at it. And if you do, we eventually made it to Clearly Forest. And there's the same problem here again. You have to use this platform, which is luckily round shaped, to position Rayman the perfect way into the curve of the hanging wall. You will fall into the lasers a few times probably, but luckily it's doable. The funny thing was that Rayman faced to the piggy bank below there, when trying to swirl the platform down. For some reason, the first few hits didn't register on the platform, but luckily, just before the power-up ended, it happened. And I'm glad that this happened, because otherwise I had to redo that hanging bullshit. So when making it to the combat section, we have some really awkward combat. Now I have found a new strategy. Rolling, but a lot more on that later. Fighting hoodlums, make sure that you are sometimes strafing past them to get the hit icon in your line of sight, but overall it's okay. So far this still seems like a fun run. We are not going to break any speedrun records of course, but we are having much fun. There are a few roadblocks here or there, but it feels more like puzzle solving. Good example, when grabbing the lockjaw, we face the wrong way. So what we do is use the ledge grab strat to make Rayman face 90 degrees off instead of 180. This way we can jump past the target and hover until the hit icon appears, and then we can lock on. In the rest of this part that's not an issue because on the next platform is a hoodlum and Rayman automatically locks onto that. This means that even if I want it, I can make circles around him to change Rayman's point of view. So if I kill the hoodlum while facing the correct way, I am cleared. However, when we get to this place we are in trouble, and that's entirely my own fault. There are hoodlums behind some form of fence, this wooden wall. You have to make a hit for them to activate and open the door. But we are, as always, faced the wrong way and we cannot make this shot. And I started to panic because yes, there are some platforms on the other side of the campfire, but they face totally the wrong way, so they are not gonna help. Now, thinking back, here's what I should have done. I had to strafe back so far that I kill all hoodlums except one. I make sure to lock onto him, position myself perfectly for the fence, then take out the hoodlum and strafe to the fence. But I had already killed all hoodlums. This run is of course a first attempt, so this run is never going to be perfect. Not that I will ever do this run again, like I said this was torture, which I was about to start, but how I fix this room specifically is that I have to find a ledge somewhere that faces me the right way. Now this ledge doesn't work, but by backing up even more, we can face entirely the right way. Or can we? We do open the fence and kill the hoodlums, but look how that positions me. I really have to let the hoodlums position me better in the upcoming levels. Facing this way is a problem because now I cannot break the teensy cage necessary to continue. So what's my solution? Strafe all the way back again to use the same ledge, letting me face this way. It took very long where my cousin is catching up on my lead, but are we out of this? Nope. Another problem occurs. The red power-up has very little time, and facing this way we cannot make it to the door in time. But when trying this platform and facing this way, we can just make it. The gate section was also funny. What I found out is that while strafing, I cannot make the jump to skip this part, so I have to do it the normal way. I did have problem hitting the lever because Rayman was locked onto the red one-hit KO hoodlum below my platform, but it was no problem. When I grab the orange can, I can reposition in any way I want, which is great. The crate section here was interesting, because up here there is a climbing wall and I don't want to do those shenanigans again. So I decided to use my speedrun strat and jump to the lever and try to hit it. But there is another problem. The hit icon appears but faces my punches to the left, meaning that my fist punches the wall and not the lever. This means I have to climb back up, but now my position is off, so I have to back up again and make Rayman face this way. This was incredibly frustrating because I knew the gap between my cousin and I began to shrink more and more and more. He was right on my heels. And to make matters worse, after failing this jump about 5 times, he surpassed me. He did it first try. Looking back, the strat is definitely to move Rayman to the right side in the air. But everything is going so fast, plus you have the panic of trying to stay ahead of your opponent, which lets you make mistakes. I do also notice this in speedrun battles that we frequently do, but also when playing by myself in a high score run. I am so focused on the perfect route and maintaining combo that I am not always able to reflect on what's going well and what doesn't work. making sure that I sometimes redo hours of gameplay for not figuring out the perfect strategy. So right now I am in last place, but as we found out, that doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Because, oh man, Hoot Stomper is insane. Well, you're in for a treat. This wasn't fair. See, let's first bring up footage from a random speedrun that I've done. Now look closely how Rayman moves. What do you see? Well, it's hard to notice because the fight is going so fast usually, but you are way faster than Hoot Stomper, which gives you a really good edge. Of course you can still get crushed by him, but with careful movement that's no big deal. Now let's switch to the run at hand, and the difference is insane. Hoot Stomper is now faster than Rayman, and that is a huge problem. Seriously. Now I have mentioned it before, but rolling seems like a good strategy here. Now rolling forward is pretty basic, you've probably seen it before. What you perhaps haven't seen yet is rolling to the side. That's pretty fast. So of course, as you can see, that move does outspeed Hoot Stomper. However, this move does have a huge drawback, which is going to be a major barrier in this run. When you roll backwards, Rayman does some form of flick flag. Cool, right? Well, no, because the flick flag is by far Rayman's slowest move he can do. Regular strafing is way better. But why is this a problem? Well, to answer that question we are going to take a look at the arena in which we stand in. An orange can will spawn when we stand on 3 pressure plates before time runs out. This is the only way to hit Hoot Stomper. But the pressure plates activate at random, always 1 out of 5. And never the one you just stood on, except when the time ran out and you have to try again, then it is a possibility that it's the same one. So in speedruns, we always have a giggle because which plates activate is very much RNG. If you get unlucky, you have to run across the entire battlefield multiple times, meaning that the time adds up. Now the distance also matters, but for an entirely different reason. Most of the times you really cannot make it in time. And sometimes you do, but you can't have Hoot Stomper in the middle of the arena, because he will instantly make the orange can despawn. But look, I hear you think, what's the big deal? Well, Rayman is always going to face one specific side of the map while strafing. But that means that some activated pressure plates are better and more beneficial than others because of the way Rayman is facing. If you have to move only slightly behind you, Rayman will do an incredibly slow flick flag. And this makes sure Hoot Stomper will catch up to you and crush you. Not only do you take damage, with the very limited health bar you have so far in the game, but it also makes sure that you will not reach the next pressure plate in time and it resets. It's entirely RNG based, we call it flick flag RNG. It's just stupid. The strat is to always walk in straight paths so you can roll as much as possible while rarely seeing the flick flags. This is almost impossible, by the way, because flick flag RNG is always going to be involved, but when you're doing this a while, eventually you will see a pattern and adapt. So my cousin Nils went game over for the 4th time, and I was busy on my 3rd run. And frankly...
Kut.
Oh? Ja, het is me gelukt!
Yes. Serieus? Oh.
Yes! Oh yeah, baby!
Ooh, time to catch a mare. Holding R2 has no influence on the next part and on the Teensy Highway. When I was about to leave the Teensy Highway, Nils also got the final hit on Hoot Stomper. Finally we could both continue, and I was in a pretty big lead again. But don't let that fool you, because being in a lead is great, but that also means that a potential roadblock happened to you before your opponent. So the other person has a much greater understanding of the roadblock before entering and can potentially do it in less time. But no need to panic. So I entered the bog of Murk on 1 hour and 9 minutes spent on this run. I decide not to go in the swamp and get this Teensy cage, because after seeing what Hoot Stomper did, I need more lives. After every 6 cages your health upgrades and we definitely want that. The witch fight was easy, only getting the yeah, once in the process. I speedrun the Bog of Murk using a lot of rolls. It's basically cheap platforming and there are plenty of hoodlums to lock onto, so you should be fine. One thing I should mention is that for some reason in my last few speedruns, I keep on forgetting to throw this guy in the swamp. That happened here too, but it was not such a big deal. Let's instead talk about Razov. My usual strat, where I spin around this hallway 5 times so Razov spawns in the foyer, it still works, but getting a hit on him is much rarer than otherwise. And usually I would get 2 hits in. Now it's just 1, which makes things incredibly slow and I don't want to fall behind. So because you always have to endure 3 runs of him sniping at you, I thought I might as well try different things in a mansion. On the plus side, sometimes Razov can randomly spawn in the hallway right before you, making sure that you often get extra hits in. But here it works different, because this only slows down the process. I mean, there's a high chance that you aren't even facing him the right way when he stands in front of you, and Razov runs way faster than I can strafe. So it's just wasted time. This makes sure that it takes extra time for him to come into a room with me. But when he is in fact in a room with me, I have to get close. He will do this weird move where I get punched all the way across the room. But anyway, let's talk about more difficult levels, like the Land of the Living Dead. I quickly want to mention this place, where this extremely niche situation actually went faster than my usual speedrun, because I instantly found the lock-on during the cutscene of this guy spawning. We fight off with the shoe and after that, we are done here, right? Well, the red power-up is necessary to break the door open. You are able to make it in time, but it's really precise work and requires a lot of rolling. I did this in 3 attempts. But right now I want to talk about the tower section, because wow, this is difficult. But for an entirely different reason than Hoodstomper. Now the problem is, facing the lockjaw is almost never going to be possible. Because think about it. With every stairs you climb, you have made a spin of roughly 160 to 180 degrees. But not me, I am still facing the wrong way. So let's use the ledge grab strategy. This makes sure that I face the target only 90 degrees off. This works, great. But let's walk up to these stairs and try the same thing, yeah? Nope, starting here it doesn't work anymore. The hit icon on the target will never appear. So am I out of options? I kept redoing this and kept failing, making sure I went all the way back to the ground floor, again and again. There was also this one time where I thought I had found a new strategy and my focus was on that, not realizing that the blue power-up actually depleted, making sure I fell down again. During this time, Nils basically caught up to me, unfortunately. I am still ahead, but in a small margin. It is really back and forth. However, I did find a solution. After the first set of stairs, we use ledge grabbing and grab the slingshot targets. But before jumping off the second one, I make an entire 180 degree spin and jump backwards. Keep in mind that for some reason while strafing, the game will sometimes not let you move left or right than a certain point. But when it does finally work, with a little guessing we can jump backwards while facing the right side. It is harder said than done to pull this off 3 times, but eventually we make it to the top of the tower. Right after that, I got kinda scared, because as you know, the tower changes and you have to go back up again. But the most insignificant place might be very scary. This place. Only one hoodlum, but without thinking, I took him out. But look at where I am facing now. I tried to go for the yellow helicopter and the slingshot target, but I cannot grab him. Shit. If I can't find a way, I have to reset this level and I have to do everything again. If this happens, Nils will win indefinitely, I think to myself. But with a stroke of good luck and a weird jump, the target does appear, making sure I can actually finish this level. Whew. And there are no changes to the octopus fight while holding R2, so let's move to the desert of the Knarren. And there is a very obvious obstacle here. We can use ledge grab to face the side of the slingshot, but you have to make sure to destroy the piggy bank. It doesn't block the path, but Rayman will lock onto that. So if he would jump now, by the time I shoot my lockjaw I will be 180 degrees off target. But this isn't actually a problem. I lose much time by falling off this rock twice because I thought jumping backwards is the strat. It wasn't. Would be a cool speedrun trick if it did. And during the second time I struggled way too much to make a good attempt. Anyway, I lose much time. But let's move on just a little bit to this nightmare pit, as I like to call it. You know how this works. Shoot the teensy cage, shoot the gong as fast as possible until the Knarren returns. Fun fact is that as kids, when the Knarren say, "Crush his bones," we as Dutchies always assumed that the Knarren said, "Crush his bows," meaning that Crush is angry. We always assumed that there was a guy named Crush. We still bring that up every now and then and we laugh about it. And because the Knar on top of this pit is so obvious in the way, I always assumed this Knar to be Crush. Anyway, Crush is a huge problem today. Because normally you have much time to escape and make your way into the hallway. But as you have seen, strafing is kinda slow and you do not have the time. In my first attempt I did the usual thing, but look at the way Rayman is facing. Exactly the wrong way. So of course I do not grab the slingshot. It took me a few minutes to figure out how I am able to make Rayman face the other way without letting go of R2. I tried to get a hold of the other climbing wall. I don't think that gives me enough time to outrun Crush, but you know, better to know for sure. But I don't even get Rayman to attach himself to the climbing wall. The wall in front of me really is the only way out of here. And it gets slightly more frustrating, because in a lot of my jumps, Rayman is positioned slightly off target from the climbing wall, making sure he doesn't grab it sometimes. But I do actually figure out a strategy that might work. The pit is round, so upon jumping out, we can ledge grab a little more to the right of the climbing wall. This positions Rayman about 100 degrees off target from the slingshot instead of 180, and the target actually appears. This might be something to go on, but it doesn't matter this run because Crush is back to its original position. Now, am I going to tell Nils this strategy? Obviously not, but I have to get it to work myself first. So after failing some jumps to get out of this pit, this happens. And for you all who don't understand, apparently when you hit the gong multiple times, the cutscene of Crush running towards the gong appears late. Usually not a problem, but what if you happen to be jumping on top of toxic water? You take damage during this entire cutscene, causing me to be game over. Damn it! Now I have to redo minutes of gameplay to get back there. At this point, Nils has just entered the pit and is now officially in a big lead. So much bad luck, but it gets even worse. After bumbling for a while, a problem returns. See, I have mentioned it before, but sometimes stupid things happen. While holding R2, there are some slingshot targets who don't let you spin around. And sometimes they do, but most of the times the same ones don't. The obstacle we run into is that on the third slingshot we have to make a turn. Now this only works sometimes, and there are plenty of jumps where we cannot turn and we have to try to jump backward to the fourth slingshot target. This will never work, by the way, but luckily we can latch ourselves onto the second target. However, this means that we are not positioned well. And the same turn glitch happens here frequently. This means that we are stuck. and we fall off most of the time. Luckily, Niels is struggling in the pit as well to outmaneuver Crush, but this is still a huge time loss. I want you to guess how much time getting up there usually costs. A few seconds, right? Well, for me this costs 3 entire minutes. And I get it, David, what are you talking about? 3 minutes is nothing, right? But I have to win a race here. If tiny sections like this cost me so much time every time, then this battle is lost. When we make it back into the nightmare pit, the roaming Knar really has lost its way. I keep trying attempt after attempt, and this guy is walking, glitching through walls, and at one point he even stood next to the Gong and Crush. Whatever, he can be in the way, but usually he is not. I know how the strategy works, it just all has to come together. Luckily, Niels doesn't see the answer. But...
Nee, ik heb het gehaald. Oh, ik ben er doorheen geglitst. Yes! Yes!
He glitched through Crush. I'm assuming that this has something to do with the shields that spawn around the Knarren, so at this point Niels is way ahead. It took me another 3 minutes till I finally made it work. And it was close. I myself also kinda glitched through Crush, which was really weird. Now what is funny to mention is that when you try to spin the camera too soon in the Great Hall, the camera does this. Yeah, whatever. But the Calf Zero part is definitely important to mention, because you have to take a very different path than normal. When you jump on this climbing wall, you cannot turn to the other side. But I anticipated this, since Niels warned me that this could very well be hard, like he said. The strategy is to jump on that platform, and with the perfect jump, you can just make it. From here, you can jump to the right side and ledge grab to be positioned in the correct way. And a little up ahead, we can even do this little speedrun tactic. Yes, it cost me 2 runs to get it right, but you can definitely make this jump. And immediately after entering this room, the camera started doing this, making me lose some more time. But now let's talk about my biggest mistake of the run. The reflux fight. Oh man. The thing with reflux is that when you want to kill him fast, you have to take damage on purpose. Mainly at his spinning attack. But when he starts to do the invulnerable attack, I usually go to the side to refill some lives. Not thinking clearly, I do that here as well. But I am faced 90 degrees off. So Rayman does not grab the climbing wall on the side. Meaning... game over. Again. And this totally sucks, because now I have to re-watch the entire unskippable cutscene again. Man, I'm not sure if I'll win now, but no point in stopping. So I fought reflux normally, and I cut it way closer than I would have liked, but I did make it. Now let's move on to the world that I'm kinda in between about. The longest shortcut could very well be really difficult because of the large amount of platforming and the timers. However, it could also be a breeze because with every platform that is round, and yes, there are a lot of round platforms, I can let Rayman face in any way I want. So we'll see. The problem starts immediately after fighting the shoe. We have to make it up there. Which is not a big deal itself, but the timer and the position are really what makes this very cruel. So we can make it to this place, but I am facing towards the door. That is, let's say, suboptimal. Because the door closes behind me and I now have no way to turn to the climbing wall. I'm stuck. Without being able to turn, I essentially soft lock myself. So I have to reset and listen to the entire speech again. And do the shoe part again. But even with this in mind, turning on the last slingshot is really hard, because the turn glitch reveals itself again. In most attempts, I am unable to turn, and I cannot allow Rayman to lose much time, since this makes sure that the doors close. I can't say no more about this than it really was a situation of trying this again and again until I finally made it. There is even a second time where I soft locked myself. This time I stood 90 degrees better for the climbing wall, but it wasn't enough to grab onto it. What went different in the successful attempt is that Rayman locked onto the lockjaw above me. See, you can see him spin around it during the strafe glide. This positions me perfectly and I can escape. This room took me a few extra tries, but it was kinda okay. It could have gotten any other way, to be honest. So luckily Rayman grabbed onto every platform kinda easily. And the same applies for the room with the invisible barriers. This run is just so unexpected of random things that are going to be incredibly hard. But that's the fun in it. And speaking of unexpected, we have never done this part before the Lee secret like this. We entered this room positioned perfectly, great. But when spamming the first button got me high enough, I jumped on the second platform and Rayman kept locking onto the first button, meaning that I am exactly 180 degrees off my target again. If you keep spamming, for some reason the button will still be pressed, but that's just lucky. I thought by ledge grabbing the third platform maybe it would be better, but nope, still locked onto the button below me. You always have to see this run as a puzzle. Every platform, every enemy, every object can be a solution with a good plan. So knowing every level well and being able to think and act quickly can give you a pretty sizable lead. Says the guy who's way behind. But anyway, let's talk about the ship part. Because, well, time for more RNG. Seriously, this run is basically some form of where do the fish spawn? So of course strafing is slow, and upon stepping on the main part of the ship, Rayman will almost always lock onto one of the cannons on the side. So one side is always covered, but it would be way better when the front or the back was covered. Because now I have to shoot the lock-on cannon, move to the other side to hit the cannon from behind, then push forward to get a few hits in on the cannon at the front. But keep in mind that Rayman will still be locked on the cannon in the middle, making sure that flick-flack RNG reveals itself occasionally. It didn't just appear all of a sudden, I have been dealing with that the entire run, I just haven't mentioned it as much. But here, huge problem. But when I'm in front of the ship, I have to strafe all the way back to the back of the boat, while getting 1 or 2 hits on the cannons of the side. Now one positive thing I should mention is that this is the time where having grabbed extra couple of teensy cages comes in really handy. Being able to soak up more damage is really what makes this doable. Not entirely sure, but I do think you can probably do this with the minimum health bar at this point. I really do think that going out of your way to grab a couple of extra teensy cages to be safe saves time in the long run. Like here for example. But there are also parts coming up where this is also the case. Now was I lucky enough? The answer, no, I was not. Close though, but not enough. This means that I can play better and maybe get a few more fish to spawn at the front or the side of the boat. Basically you want to make as few trips to the back as possible. Although it was close, my second run actually was successful. And now I will show you a hilarious reset. When I get control over Rayman, I immediately run forward and charge my fist for the fatty. But what happens then, of course? Rayman will lock onto the piggy bank, making sure that there is no way of turning back after destroying it. I could have also jumped back before breaking it, but I immediately knew something was up as I failed it. This made sure I had to watch the rolling snowballs cutscene again.
Dus ik stond met mijn rug naar die fatty toe. En ik kon...
Get fucked, idiot.
Ja, kut.
Oh, dat vind ik heel leuk.
I actually have very little to say about the summit beyond the clouds, besides 3 things. 1. Getting on the climbing wall and facing the right way here is very impractical. So you're better off by just jumping to the red can from this box. 2. You can still do this speedrun tactic. Strafing doesn't ruin that strat or anything. And 3. For some reason, I won the snowboard race, but the game registered it as a loss. Here, I can prove it. Let me show you unedited footage. I surpass Glowbox. Yes, I fall off this cliff, but it doesn't matter. Because when I make it to the wooden bridge, or whatever this is, you can clearly see that I am still in the lead. So when you make it to this place and you are in the lead, there is almost no way you can lose. Because yes, Glowbox is faster than you, but you can push him backwards so you remain in the lead. But then, voila, failed. For some reason. Now 2 levels to go. We are currently sitting at 3 hours and 37 minutes of gameplay. Speedruns would have been finished over an hour ago, but this run ain't no speedrun. And this is very difficult. And the difficulty was about to ramp up. Big time. Oh my god, are we starting to think that this run actually will be impossible? See, this room is okay and nothing special. But while doing this, Nails, being in a big lead, is currently facing an immense problem. And I already start to think ahead to those parts and what I can do. But let's go one problem at a time. The first problem here with the "Ah, no fair, he's protected by a sorcerer" line. I exactly did one attempt of trying the speedrun tactic of killing the sorcerer from down here, but I instantly gave up. Because I noticed right away that this cannot be done. To perform this method, you have to jump forward, punch the fatty, in mid-air change direction, lock onto the sorcerer that just appeared, and with a punch to the right side you are able to hit the sorcerer. But this is impossible in this run because we cannot change direction mid-air. So that brings me to this room, that I don't visit often. This run is not a problem per se, only slightly annoying. Rayman locks onto the first hoodlum he encounters and everyone that remains in his bag stays alive for a while. This makes sure you frequently fall off and you have to redo parts here. So that brings us to here, and Nils struggled here a lot. We've already established how bad hanging walls are. Doing this normally while strafing is really not doable, so you have to be creative. After some frustration, Niels decided to strafe all the way back to the beginning of the level, find some random crate that positions Rayman slightly to the right, and it was just enough for him to run all the way back and be positioned perfectly for the hanging climbing wall. He really spent a long time here. For me it was way faster. Yes, it was still a couple of minutes, but I found a different strategy. I mean, it should be possible to use the bombs that this hoodlum throws as a damage boost onto these crates. Skipping the hanging climbing wall entirely? Well, I had never done that. And it was kind of a risk, but I didn't know what else to do. I have tried a few protrusions of crates, but the game does not let me stand on these. And after a while of trying, I do in fact make it up here with the damage boost. Funny how after 21 years we still learn new things about this game. But now let's talk about this room. I failed here. This doesn't happen, like, ever. But I got shot twice by these hoodlums. I mean, how? Whatever. We place the boulder on this button, we go in and wreak havoc. We take out one hoodlum, strafe backwards till this guy is in front of me. Take him out and this guy as well. Good, so now we...
Kut. Wacht. Uh-oh.
Wat is er?
Ik moet denk ik resetten. Nee!
Ja, dat dacht ik al. Je bent in de val getrapt.
Nee, kut!
Ja, ik heb expres... Ja, ik wist dat dit zou komen. Ik ben zo blij dat ik hier gezwegen heb. Je zit vast in de kamer van de...
Oh, maar dan moet ik het hele Hoodlum Headquarters opnieuw doen.
Ja.
So back to this place it is. And at this point I see no way how I'm going to win this. But that wouldn't matter, and I will tell you why in just a bit. What I want to mention is that after doing this entire part again, I got to this part with the woman RNG. Now I know how this is going to sound, but I'm still gonna say it anyway. I got 0 women. Amazing. I mean, that has never happened to me before. Each woman has a time loss and you don't want them. But 0? Holy damn. I'm not even sure if that's ever happened to me. Incredible. Whew. Maybe the comeback can still be real. No. No, it cannot. And here's why. This room is not very difficult, besides having no chance at doing the shortcut. When beating the horrible machine, it is beneficial to use strafing. But then we make it here, and oh my god, this level is a pain. Oh man, is this horrible. So, if you haven't figured it out yet, there is a time limit with rubber banding, and we are very slow. Now that is a problem on itself, but look at Rayman while traversing around this mini tower. Of course he keeps looking to one side, and what does this mean? Random flick-flack RNG is back to haunt us. Great, we lose even more time. Really, you don't understand. For the past 4 hours we've been freaking out by how slow these flick-flacks are. Fucking flick-flacks, man. Can't even think of a single scenario that makes using flick-flacks beneficial. Even when not thinking about this strafing run specifically. Anyway, take this climbing wall for example. When coming out of the tube here before, you rarely are positioned good to latch onto here. This means that you have to get to the next platform on the lava. And well, that is very not great. My estimate is that 3 out of 5 runs instantly end here. But look, you are currently watching my first attempt, which made it very far. I run through this hallway and somehow I survive. Probably due to rubber banding working in my favor for once. But as I jump here, I am positioned to the side. And with a stroke of excellent luck, I do grab onto the climbing wall. I thought the run was over right here, but we continue, and unfortunately we are not in the clear yet. Because I think it has something to do with killing this red 1-hit KO hoodlums from a pretty far distance, but Rayman somehow spins around a bit, making sure he does not grab onto this climbing wall. And the run is over. This was so weird. It was almost like Rayman locked onto an object in the wall or something. However, I wouldn't make it any close for the next 10 minutes. I keep on dying. Game over after game over, and in some attempts, I really feel like there was nothing I could have done to prevent it. Deaths because of the random flick-flacks are the worst, because it feels like you had a good attempt, only the game decided that it's time you randomly got unlucky and let you do a couple of flick-flacks. But I would also die a lot in this hallway. Sometimes I would get stuck on something, sometimes I wouldn't latch onto a climbing wall, and sometimes I was just too slow. It was really frustrating. I must also say that getting roadblocks like this after focusing for 4 hours straight is not fun. It is currently almost midnight and we are getting tired, but I have to keep my focus. I really cannot tell you why this attempt worked and others didn't. I got flick-flacks in the beginning. But apparently something went really right, because I go through this hallway basically damageless for some reason. I also decide not to go grab extra lives and use that extra platform with the hoodlum on it. And as I make it to this climbing wall, Rayman still tried to spin to the left a bit, but this time it wasn't enough and he did grab onto the wall. And at this point I knew I had finally beaten it. But unfortunately, Nils has been complaining about the beginning of the Tower of Leptis for minutes now. What can possibly be so hard? Well, look, we can still make this jump, which brings us here. This room is really kinda hard because you are unable to use the climbing walls and especially the hanging climbing walls. It took me a few minutes to figure out the strategy to jump after the first lockjaw, and when strafing, that immediately made Rayman lock onto the one above me. If this couldn't be done, I think the run ended here. But anyway, we have made it here, and this, oh my god, the run might be in serious jeopardy. Because what's the big deal, right? When you usually get here, you have basically won this level. Not this time. This, if this is even possible, is just the worst thing ever. And we'll test the limits of the definition of impossible. See, as usual, we grab the red power-up and we have to break the door open. But that door is really far. With regular running, you won't feel this in like ever. But the red power-up has almost worn off every time. How the hell are we going to do this while only strafing? So regular strafing is going to be way too slow. But there are two more problems. See, because we skipped the entire fight section below here, Rayman will lock onto a teensy cage and a piggy bank while strafing through the hall. This is obviously very bad because, look, when Rayman locks onto the teensy cage, he will spin around that, and which way do you think Rayman will face when he gets out of range from the teensy cage? Exactly! He faces the red power-up. Now, why is this such a bad thing, you ask? Well, we've just established that the only thing Rayman can do to get to that door in time is rolling. But if we face the wrong way, Rayman will do almost non-stop flick flags. And you don't even make it to the end of the hallway with this. So we have to try and face the wall and move as closely as possible to the wall. But keep in mind that you cannot hug the left wall because, as you can see, you can get stuck and lose time at these wall decorations. But what is even worse is the feeling that you get somewhat close, but Rayman locks onto the last piggy bank, which makes him spin around and create flick flags right before the door and the red power-up wears off. It's just... what can we do? The last thing I want to do is reload and try this part normally, but after about 15 minutes of rolling and flick-flacking through this entire hallway, that is the one thing I can think of at this point. But I haven't reloaded just yet, and it's a good thing I didn't, because what I tried to do at the time was to let Rayman face the exact way I wanted to. Because listen, if I voluntarily strafe back to the beginning of the hallway and lock onto the piggy bank in the beginning, I might be able to choose the exact way Rayman will face. Obviously, I want him to face forward with a little more to the wall. And at this point, it is just to roll as fast as possible and hope to God that Rayman doesn't lock onto the teensy cage. Now, what will cost you many runs is that when you start to strafe and roll a lot, the camera starts to bug out. Maybe you've already seen it in this video, but here. Because the camera is turning, it feels like you should pull your joystick back to move forward, instead of moving forward. I figure this is vague and obscure, but trust me when I say that you don't want to do this. Just keep moving your joystick forward, no matter what the camera does. And if you fail, you run into the hallway to lock onto the teensy cage, strafe back onto the piggy bank and then back again to position perfectly so hopefully you can have another attempt. Except when Rayman immediately locks onto the teensy cage again, because then you repeat the process entirely. But if done perfectly, you are able to do it. And I luckily kept trying, because if I had reloaded and did this level the normal way, there is no way that you can influence the way Rayman is facing. And if you have faced him the wrong way, this could very well be the end of the run. But speaking of the end of the run, we are not there yet. As a matter of fact, the part immediately after this door is the next roadblock. And of course, it's a hanging climbing wall. I don't think I have mentioned this part in any of my runs, but they were a huge sticking point here. See, the climbing wall goes a little to the side. And as you may remember, you cannot turn and you fall off frequently. And you see those, I don't know, wooden pipes? You cannot stand on them. This part is just trial and error about where you will grab the hanging climbing wall. You have to strafe back and forward quite a lot to use the ledge grabbing before starting every attempt. Or do you? Because there is actually a better strategy, if you think outside of the box. After trying the same way for 11 minutes, I knew that ledge grabbing the crate and trying to move forward on the climbing wall in that direction doesn't work. So we have to make Rayman spin around a little. And for that we need an object. But there is no object here. Or is there? Because what is stopping us from strafing all the way back to the piggy bank from the last obstacle? Nothing. There is nothing stopping us. We can make Rayman face the same way as the crates will face us, but just slightly, oh so slightly to the right. And using this strategy, we can move on. What I also want to say is that this is another reason that you shouldn't want to do this level the normal way. Because you don't have to break the piggy bank to continue, but that object is the single thing this run is still going strong. If you would accidentally break it, this run ends right here. And I know I've said it before, but this time I'm serious. The run is over. In this level. We've made it so far while only strafing, but we are going to run into an impassable roadblock. And I knew this ahead. I think the thought popped into my head when I was on the boat in the Summit Beyond the Clouds or something, but I already knew this run would end this way. But why? Well, the reason is really anticlimactic. When we go all the way up the tower, we get to this room. And yes, after so many climbing walls and the hanging climbing wall roadblocks, this room literally is just one too many. Because how is this going to work? Rayman can lock onto the climbing wall, but in a regular run we have to jump backwards, spin and latch onto the wall that is facing 90 degrees to another side. After that we latch onto the hanging climbing wall and climb out of here. But these are exactly 2 steps that we cannot do in this run. We cannot spin mid-air, and even if we could, Rayman would then face the climbing wall the exact same way, and while hanging there, at least when holding R2, when Rayman bumps into something you cannot move anymore. The exact part where I already thought that this run would end, did in fact end the run. And this really bugged me because, I mean, if it was some big boss fight that just got overwhelming or something, I really should feel like the game beat me. But this is just a random hall with nothing in it. Niels, being in a pretty sizable lead, already gave up here and did it the normal way, without strafing, to be able to finish the run. It just feels dumb to end the run here. But alas, there is no way of continuing while strafing. But what if there was a way? Because there actually is a way to make it to that platform and progress. However, I am really not proud of this. What am I talking about? I used an infinite power-up glitch. I know, I never use glitches. I've mentioned this a lot on my channel, and I wouldn't if there was any other way, even if it would take hours, but there isn't. And this run has been frustrating enough for the past 5 hours. It's almost 1 AM and we are very tired. But although I want this run to be over, it was far from over. To make this glitch work, we had to reload, and the glitch actually triggered all the way at the bottom. And this, by the way, is another reason why I will allow this glitch just this one time. As far as I know, it only works in this level. It's almost too convenient to not use it in this ultra niche situation. Anyway, you fight the twin droids as usual, but the place you stand on when the fanfare music plays upon defeating them makes the game glitch. To know you've triggered the glitch, you can see a small stutter in the camera while watching the cutscene of the hoodlum running upstairs. When you defeat the last twin droid, you want to jump from the ground to the stairs. If you do this, you should see the stutter and the glitch triggered. Actually, why am I telling you this? I don't want to encourage any people to try this, but anyway. I play normally up to that part, and with grabbing the yellow power-up, we can just fly through this room. I mean, I am sorry, but it just felt stupid to end the video here. So let me just give you the ending that you deserve. Because how much more shit can the Tower of Leptis throw at me? Well, apparently a lot. Because yes, even when I'm already so close to the end of the game, it would take me another hour until I end this run. And I will not spoil yet if this run is possible or not, but from this point to the point where I stop playing, the run would still take an hour. But why? There are only 2 more levels coming up, right? Now let me just say right away, if you get dizzy fast, please click to the end of this video, because I didn't know the horrible game design they put in the flying machine part. Apparently, as you have noticed, holding the strafe button spins you to the right, making the entire level constantly spin around on you. And imagine doing this a little after 1 AM or something. I really lost it at this point. I'm sorry, but just look at my gameplay. I'm really not built for this. I got totally disoriented. On my first attempt, I didn't even make it through the first room and half of my lives were taken away. It was awful. So I would spend the next half an hour with a non-stop turning screen. Besides the moment where I had to fire on enemy ships every now and then. I do want to mention this part, with the clock as I like to call it. Nils, who has already stopped playing at this point and was ready for bed, watched me via video call. I was so proud that I made it all the way to the clock after 20 minutes of a spinning screen, but I had to make it through the clock. I already had very little health left, so one mistake and it's done. The only thing I can do is count the amount of blades that are roaming before a pause occurs and then try to be as fast as I can. Let me show you what happens.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Die zag je hoor.
Oh.
Uh-oh. Ja, dat draait ook rond, pas op.
Waar moet ik naartoe?
Waar de meeste klokdingen zijn, daar moet je in, ja. Uh-oh.
Oké, even kijken. 1, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3. Wanneer moet ik gaan? 1, 2, 3.
Je had niet eens de kans om te gaan. Je bent gewoon instantly gedespawned ook.
Ah. Ik wil dit ook echt niet morgen weer doen.
So I had to do it all over again. But I did get a lot better. See, compare my first gameplay to what you see here. Only 3 hits. This attempt I do actually make it. Sometimes patience pays off. Just really unfortunate that I got clocked. But this video is getting already kinda long, so let's move on to the ending boss. Now I will spoil it. The run is actually possible and Nils had already won. Even when shortly letting go of the strafe button in the climbing wall room, where I had to use an infinite power-up glitch. He already went to sleep, but here I was, alone in my apartment at 1:30 AM, trying to beat the final boss. And unfortunately, that turned out to be way easier said than done. I even reset once because I almost ran out of lives. The first phase is kinda hard because again we move very slow and we have to evade the lightning attacks. But stick with it and you can do it, maybe with some practice. What I do want to shine light on is the second reflex fight, because oh my god, never in my life have I spent so much time here. Usually, you make 3 trips around him and he is dead. Well, here it works a little different. The good thing is that you can use ledge grab a lot to face Rayman the exact way you want, but because you have to do an extra ledge grab to face the lockjaw, and not being able to run fast on his arm, you rarely get damage in, if at all. I had plenty of attempts where I didn't do a single hit point of damage onto him and I had to make another round. The first HP of damage was done in attempt 4. And again, I did this on my own, being very frustrated in my apartment. Anyway, I lost count with how many spins I had to do, so I counted it during editing. I did 17 runs around Reflux. What? But I do get rewarded. The third phase is nothing new, and luckily I got Reflux 4 in only 2 rounds of healing, which I rarely achieve. And with that, we strafe forward one final time, and after 6 hours, 3 minutes and 12 seconds of holding R2, I can finally let that damn button go. This run was super interesting to me. I've been wrapping my head around Rayman 3 challenges I want to try, and honestly, I thought I had done everything. And then all of a sudden, my cousin throws this idea. Amazing, absolutely love it, for this one time only. But now I will never do this run again. Would I recommend this run? No, absolutely not. You will not achieve anything, there is nothing to gain from this pain. But if you have any other suggestions for Rayman 3 runs I haven't done so far, please suggest them to me in the comments. I really am looking for new ways to play this game. This has been yet another obscure video game run, so until next time I'd say, take care.